I know what I said to you last time I was here, X. I know. I sobered up, and I thought I could just repress everything, like I have done all of my life, and just keep pushing through to the next job. I am in way too fucking deep, X. Way too fucking deep. And I really don't know what is going to happen to me at this point. I have always been reliable, no matter what. But something about this job seemed so final. Like they were preparing to get rid of me, and decided that they may as well get as much use out of me as they possibly could before they throw me away. I have been here for years, and have never heard of anyone else being sent here. I was shocked when I got the call. They asked for me by name. By f***ing name. I already knew that they knew me, but something about being asked for by an elite client, personally, made my blood run cold. If I couldn't get out before, I definitely can't now. That's if I'm even allowed to continue working like I am. Half of me wants to run as fast as I possibly can after sending this, and get to a country where they can never find me, and half of me doesn't want to leave. Half of me just wants to carry on with nothing changing. I hate change. If you have read any of my previous free posts here, I think you can imagine where this is going. But if not, I am going to link them here so that you can read them. If you can't be bothered to read them, I am a private contractor who, through an undisclosed company, I work for the elites of the world, doing whatever task or arranging whatever event they have in mind for us. This is usually always done through a proxy, and it is rare that I meet the client personally. This all changed with my last job. This happened to me yesterday, and is still fresh in my mind. I say yesterday, but it was more like 3 or 4 days in total that all blurred into one, and I barely slept the whole time. It just kept going and going like an endless nightmare. It involves a place you have probably heard about in passing, but that you don't really truly know anything about, other than vague rumors and conspiracy theories. I was involved in an event that took place at Bohemian Grove. I am not kidding. This is not fantasy. I didn't have a bad dream, and I did not imagine this. It's hard to describe exactly what it was, a ritual, an event. So much happened, but I will try to Greentext every single part so that you understand. As for my safety, this couldn't make it any worse for me at this point. If they kill me, I don't even care. At least then the nightmares will stop. As usual, I got a call from my boss at an ungodly hour. I think it was approaching midnight when I got the call, and he told me that this next job would be the most important I had ever taken part in. I asked him what he meant, and he told me to shut the fuck up and get there right now for a briefing, as I would be flying out tonight. 2 other workers were already there when I got there. I recognized them from the job on the island. I know what I was told on the phone, but telling me it was going to be the most important job yet was what I heard pretty much every time, and so I was preparing and hoping that the job this time would not be as taxing mentally as the previous ones was. Just some simple guarding or something, please. Before briefing us, the boss stressed very heavily that we must abide by every single rule set for us, and to make sure we do everything that is asked without even raising an eyebrow, regardless of what it is. He told us that if we even looked confused at a request or hesitated for a second, he could not guarantee that we would not be punished. Now I was starting to wonder what the fuck this was about. We always had to sign NDAs for these jobs, and we knew that sharing any information about them would cause a lot of problems, and this was no different. A massive stack of them, more than I had ever seen. With that taken care of, we had the shortest brief ever, I think, in the history of the job. He told us that all 3 of us were asked for by name as a result of our exceptional work during the job on the island with the human hunting event. This was a first, not just for me, but for anyone who has ever worked for this company. We were told that special assistance was required urgently for an event that was being hosted at Bohemian Grove. I almost choked when I heard him say it. There weren't really any details other than that. So that was it. We flew out almost instantly and touched down a few hours later. We were received by some men in black suits once we landed and were escorted to the front gate of the place where we were stopped and thoroughly checked. We were allowed to keep our firearms, but I had my phone confiscated as well as my wallet and any type of identification that I had on me, like my driver's license, etc. After the pat-down, one of the guards jokingly asked us for our member's fee, and I just chuckled awkwardly, and then we were escorted to a small cabin area just inside. That was where I saw the client. It was not someone who I expected to see at all. Giving a name here, I think will guarantee that I cannot be kept alive, and I want to at least try to keep my options open, so here is what I will tell you. He is an incredibly famous actor, and someone who you would recognize instantly. I kind of heard he was a bit of an asshole, but had no idea he had ties to this place. I should have known even before this though. Let's just say he is incredibly devout and outspoken about his religion, and is basically one of the figureheads for Hollywood at this time. Absolutely untouchable. Bad fucking news for me. He was sitting at a desk, but he wasn't doing anything when we entered. He was just waiting for us, I suppose. He told us to stay standing and to be quiet for the next 5 minutes while he spoke. He told us that he had heard of our expertise and decided that he wanted us to personally assist him for various parts of the special event that he would be hosting. He said that it was an incredibly special occasion, with all of the stops being pulled out, and that he expected nothing but perfection. He assigned the other 2 members to a few of the groups that would be attending and gave some orders, and he assigned me to his group. Something about the way he smiled and laughed was so sinister, like you could so easily tell it was fake, and that he had learned how to play a part his entire life and put on a friendly show when everyone was looking. He put his hand on my shoulder, chuckled, and then told me that I was lucky to not be attending as a member, and that I should be grateful he wasn't going to make me go for an initiation. He walked out of the door and just simply made a motion with his hand for me to follow behind him. He brought me to an outside area where a large crowd had now gathered. There were so many celebrities that I recognized instantly. Actors, musicians, singers, and even a couple of major politicians that I recognized, but I think that word is a bit of an understatement. They were gathered around a kind of small stage with a banner over the top of it, which read, Novae Aetates, which I had no idea what that meant. I'm guessing it was in another language, but no one ever translated it for me. Then, in the middle of the stage, there was a huge sort of effigy that towered high up into the sky. There were 2 of them, in fact. The effigies were strange. It was draped in a long red cloak that had symbols on it, which looked to be some kind of S shape, combined with some other shapes that it was going through. The effigy also had a gigantic pair of wings that spread very far out, and seemed to have been dipped in red ink or something like that. I was led to the stage by the actor, which I guess I'll just call him that for convenience's sake, and he told me to stand next to him on the stage until he said otherwise. I just nodded and complied. The actor gave a welcoming speech and greeted a lot of people by their names and did some back and forth with the crowd of people. He started giving some sort of motivational kind of speech that I didn't really fully grasp the meaning of. He talked about ascension and culling the weeds from the great earth, and I think at some point toward the end of the speech, he mentioned something about the great big project that was coming in the near future. After the end of the speech, he made some motions towards some other staff off to the side and told me to go and help them. They had 2 cages with them that they needed help bringing to the stage. They were kind of like those cages that you would put your cat into to take them to the vet, except they were much larger. They had to be, because they had humans inside of them. One was a man who looked to be very young, possibly just turned 18 years old. He looked frail and weak, like he hadn't had a good meal in many years. It looked like his bones would turn to dust from a single touch, and his face and nose were both sunken in, and he looked like a ghost in terms of his complexion. The one in the other cage was a child, a young girl, who was crying out as loud as she possibly could. I could barely even hear her over the chanting of the crowd. We were told to bring them to the center of the stage, and we did so, without hesitation. The actor told us that now the speech was over, we had to complete the introductory ritual for the event to officially begin, and that nothing else could happen until it was done. He told us that we were to take both people out of the cages and tie them to the effigies. I tried not to show anything on my face, but I think he noticed something and just smirked at me and pointed. None of the other men gave it a second thought. I went over to one of the cages and pulled the young man out, who didn't have any energy left inside of his body to fight or kick or scream. It was horrible. It was pathetic. There was nothing he could do, and there was nothing I could do either. I helped lift him up by his arms, and the other men began to tie him while the others got to work, tying up the child, who was doing her best to bite and scream and spit, and make it as uncomfortable as she possibly could for all of those involved. The chanting of the crowd got louder and louder as we finished tying them up, but I had no idea what they were saying. It was something in a language that I did not recognize at all. The actor motioned to an unlit torch that was on the table nearby and pointed at me and told me to grab it. He told me that he wanted me to be the one to light it and kickstart the event. My brain felt frozen, and I felt like I wasn't really in control of my body anymore and was kind of just a spectator in my own mind. Without thinking, I grabbed it and lit the torch, and he told me to light both of the effigies. He gave me a wry smile and told me that I should be honored, as people would pay large amounts of money to be the ones to light the effigies. I held the lit torch out in front of me for what felt like forever, and I lit the man's effigy first and watched it shoot up instantly in flames. They must have doused it in alcohol or something, because it wasn't a natural slow burn at all. It was an instant, towering inferno, and the man did not even have a chance to scream for his life, if he even could at that point. I keep telling myself in my head that he was already dead before I lit it up, and that he wasn't truly conscious, but deep down, I don't believe that. At least he didn't suffer for too long before his body became nothing but a charred, unrecognizable burnt color. As soon as I lit the thing, there was a roar of applause, and the chanting continued and continued, but more aggressively and with more force for each second that passed me by. The second he saw the flames flash upwards, the actor started laughing incredibly hard. Not like a chuckle or a forced laughter. It was like he just saw the funniest thing ever in his life and literally could not hold it back any longer. It was like hearing the Joker laugh. He had to clasp his hand around his own mouth to stop himself and so that he could compose himself. He clapped and congratulated me and told me I did a good job and that he knew he could count on me after what he had heard. I assume he was talking about the island, and it made my heart drop into my stomach. Before the three of us got there, I never really got given a reason why he required us as staff, whether for security or for something else. I think this sick fuck just had us here for extra entertainment. Then he stopped clapping and stared directly into my eyes and told me, "Now the girl." I stood frozen, and with all of my heart, I didn't want to do it, but he slapped me hard across the face and told me that I was to follow his orders instantly, or I would face severe consequences. I turned to the girl, who was bawling her eyes out, and I shuffled closer. All I could do was mumble out a sorry as I lit the effigy up, but it didn't shoot up in flames this time. They had not doused this one in anything, so I had to watch as the girl kicked and screamed and begged for her life as the flames crawled ever so slowly up to her. They engulfed her feet first, and the screams were unbearable at this point. I wanted to cover my ears, but I could not move a muscle. I think she had passed away by the time the flames had reached her abdomen, because the screaming stopped, and she became limp. The crowd was cheering and chanting, just like the last time, but the actor was not smiling or laughing anymore. He had his eyes fixed on me, giving me a death stare. He grabbed me by the collar and told me that I had just completed my initiation. He also told me that all would be well as long as I played the part, but if I didn't, then there would be consequences. I just felt numb by that point. The actor addressed the crowd again and told everyone that he had something very special in store for us tonight, something reserved for special occasions, but that we had to attend to some business before it could begin. He told us it was something that we could not miss, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and etc. He led us to a kind of weird-shaped door that looked like it went down to a basement and ushered us all in. I stood outside with the actor and waited for his word, and he told me to stick close by him as he would have some special tasks for me. The door led down incredibly far down and transitioned into some kind of tunnels that we followed for a while until we came up to a very large door. The actor made his way to the front of it, and before opening up the door, he told everyone that the selection this year is second to none, and that people would have to bid in an orderly manner, and that if there was any untoward behavior toward their fellow bidders, then they would be disqualified. I wasn't quite sure what he meant until he opened up the door. As soon as we stepped in, there was like a thick layer of glass separating the half of the room that we were standing in from the other half of the room. It was like a stereotypical lineup that you would see on a cop show, except the men behind the glass were chained up in all different manners. The men were of different ethnicities, with some clearly having been trafficked and taken from different countries, as they were saying things in completely foreign languages and did not understand most of what other people were saying. Some looked to have been starved for the better part of the year. Some looked to be quite healthy, but none of the men there were muscular or looked like they could fight back at all. There was also no one too old. Just from a look, the oldest man on display could not have been older than maybe 30 at most, but that was just from a glance. Most of them were just chained to the wall by the waist. Some were gagged or blindfolded, and one man at the end was held to the floor by a metal brace around his neck. There was a small gap in the glass, just big enough to fit your hand through, which I assume is so we could hear the men who were chained up. The actor stepped in front of the glass and announced the beginning of the auction. He set out all the ground rules and how the bidding would be conducted. 2 security guards, dressed in body armor, wearing helmets with visors, would unchain each prisoner as their bidding started, and they would drag them by their arms over in front of the glass. They both had rifles and would press them into the back of the prisoner to make sure that they didn't try anything. The actor would give a little performance in order to try and really sell the prisoners. He would give a small speech about them. He would have the prisoners speak, and would even get them to showcase their talents like they were animals at a circus. He would have some of them dance or do flips or whatever he could think of, and even if they could not do it, he would force them to. At one point, he tried to get one of the frailer prisoners to do a backflip, but he was in clearly no state to do so, and after being hit by the butt of the guards' guns and being forced to do it, he attempted it and hit his head on the stone floor and knocked himself clean out. Everyone was chuckling and giggling, and the actor apologized for the spoiled goods and told the guards to put the man out of his misery. They didn't even bother to shoot him. They hit him in the head with their guns until he was nothing but a mess on the floor, and the other elites there cheered at the sight. Nearly every single elite had purchased a prisoner, and that is when the actor grabbed me by the back of the neck and pushed it up against the glass. I did not try and struggle, because I knew what would happen if I dared to lay my hands on him. He pushed my nose into the glass as hard as he could, and told me to pick one. He told me that I could pick any of the prisoners that were left that I liked. I picked the frailest one I could see, hoping that maybe I could show him some mercy, but I think that was too hopeful. I was sent in to help the guards transport the purchased prisoners into the room for the final event of the night. Once I helped drag them in, I got called back to the actor, as he wanted me to experience it firsthand, which I had no idea what he meant at the time. We waited for maybe an hour before he led us to another room underground. He opened up the doors, and my eyes were instantly blinded by the bright white room. It was really surgical, and there were gurneys and hospital beds, as well as what looked like a dentist chair with straps all over it. The actor again started his little show and explained what was on offer. He said that we could take turns with our property, one by one, using any of the tools that were available. He explained that he had some experimental things on offer too. I knew what was about to happen, and I was not sure if I had the stomach to sit through it anymore. Before the island, I could disassociate my way through any job and make myself numb to it all, and live a relatively normal life aside from the job and the nightmares. But it was getting too real and too difficult at this point. 2 guards wheeled in the first prisoner on a gurney, and my heart sank. It was the men I had chosen. I thought I might be lucky enough to be left alone for the rest of the night, but that looked like an impossible task. The actor called me over and told me that I would have the privilege of being the first of the night, and that I had the honor of showing everyone how it was done. But there was a catch. Of course, there was a fucking catch. The actor told me that he would be choosing everything that would happen, and that I would have to carry out whatever he asked for. He grabbed me by the neck and pulled me in close to him and started whispering to me. There wasn't even a threatening tone in his voice. He just spoke like I wasn't even a person and didn't even look directly at me. He told me that this would repay my debt and that my night would be finally over, but only if I played along fully. He told me that if I even raised an eyebrow at one of his requests, then I would be the next person on offer. I got the message. I did what I needed to do. The man was placed in the dentist chair and was fully strapped in, head to toe, with no chance of escape. The actor told the guards to remove the gag so that he could hear if I was doing my job properly. The man looked so frightened. He couldn't even keep his body still. He was just shivering and shaking against his will. The actor pointed towards a set of pliers and told me to remove the prisoner's front 2 teeth. Now my hands were shaking as I raised it up. I could see the wild fear in his eyes as I brought it closer, and he was trying desperately to move his face away, to anywhere else at all, but the straps made it impossible. I placed the pliers on the first of his front 2 teeth, and he was doing his best to try and bite and spit, and I was told to hit him with the pliers, which I did instantly, and he stopped trying to resist, and instead just closed his eyes as tight as they would allow, and gripped what little of the chair that he could. I tried to pull it as gently as possible, but it was never going to work. His screams were unbearable, and I think I caused him more pain than I would have by ripping it cleanly. I said fuck it, and attempted to rip the tooth out in one pull, but I instead broke the top half of the tooth off and left the other half rooted into his gums. The crowd were chanting again. The actor was grinning and laughing, and the prisoner could not stop the tears from flowing down his face. It took 2 more attempts to fully pry out the last bit of the tooth from the prisoner's gums, and the very last pull sent specks of blood flying onto my face. The prisoner was attempting to writhe and could not stop whimpering at the pain. The actor urged me to carry on and to take out the second one. The second tooth was much more successful, and I managed to remove it in one pull, which did nothing to dull the pain for the prisoner. The actor interjected and told me that the audience were probably warmed up enough and that he wanted to proceed to the main event that he wanted me to unveil. He told everyone that he didn't want to prolong my turn, as he didn't want to ruin the fun for the rest of the elites, but he did intend to display something to them. A guard was signaled to walk in, and he brought with him a small metal tray with a vial and a needle. The actor told everyone that what they were about to see was something truly astounding and that had been worked on in a lab for years and was finally seeing progress. He did not explain the purpose of it or what it was being researched for, but he showed excitement that he could not contain and said that they would enjoy it. He motioned towards me, and I picked up the syringe and put whatever was in the vial into it. The substance was strange. I got a brief smell of it as it entered the syringe, and it smelled exactly like cleaning chemicals would, with a hint of vinegar. The contents of the vial was almost completely black, and was the same color when we put it into the syringe. I brought the syringe down to the wrist of the prisoner, but the actor told me to stop and instead go for the veins in his neck. The prisoner was still crying and whimpering, and seemed to be uttering some kind of prayer as best as he could, but he could not form the words properly without his front two teeth. I inserted the syringe and watched as the black contents entered into his veins and ran all the way down. Nothing happened initially, but after a few minutes, the veins in his wrist and all across his body also began to turn black. The prisoner started to convulse on the chair, and it seemed like they might break it in half. The prisoner began frothing a kind of black bile from his mouth, and I watched as one by one he started to break each and every strap that was holding him down. The neck strap was the first one to break, followed by the arms that he ripped off with ease, and then the rest followed. He rolled to his side and hit the floor, and was kind of growling in between bouts of bile spilling out of his mouth. He started to crawl and pull himself across the floor towards me before lifting himself up onto his feet. Every single elite in the crowd was completely silent, and they could not believe their eyes. The prisoner, who was once frail and weak and looked like he could be snapped in half, grabbed me by the throat and lifted me into the air with just one hand. I wasn't exactly the heaviest or the buffest guy ever, but I was still amazed. I thought I was about to die until one of the guards put a bullet into the prisoner's head, and I dropped to the floor. The crowd erupted and clapped, and the actor joined in on the applause. The prisoner was carted back out of the room, and the actor continued the show like nothing had happened. Thankfully, I was able to mostly take a back seat after that experience, and the night went as smoothly as could be expected when you had to watch a ton of rich fucks torturing malnourished slaves. The actor thanked me personally after the night was over, and told me that he greatly appreciated my services and would be keeping me in mind for future opportunities, and he just grinned as I left. That's not the worst part. Only one of the two other workers came back onto the flight with me. I tried to ask the guy where he was and what happened, but he just shook his head and would not talk. He had a black eye and bloodied knuckles, and I knew that trying to pry any further would not be smart. I went home. I slept for nearly a full 24 hours, and I woke up to the largest check I had ever witnessed in my life. My boss told me that we had glowing reviews, and that we should be looking forward to more of the same. I can't fucking do this anymore, X. I have to leave this fucking country and never ever come back. I need to become a ghost in some eastern country and pretend that this nightmare never happened. It's obvious that they are just toying with me at this point, that I know too much, and they want to squeeze as much as possible out of me before they deal with me. The other worker not coming back pretty much confirmed all of my worst fears. When I started writing this post, I was still lying to myself and trying to gaslight myself into thinking that it was just another job like usual and that I could just keep going like usual, but having to relive the whole event has made me realize that nothing is the same as it was, and that this is all over. I pray for forgiveness, but I know that I do not deserve it, and I don't expect it. That was my last job. I'm not going fucking back. I'm sorry, X, but this will be my final post here. I just hope that they can't find me in time. Has anyone ever encountered shadow men before? I have never posted on X before, because I do not believe in the supernatural. However, my beliefs have changed on the subject due to a series of events that I have encountered whilst on my late night walks over the last few months. I live in NYC and often go for walks in Central Park during 8 to 9 o'clock at night. The problem is that I have seen something very peculiar whilst walking near random streetlights on occasion. I notice, without any explanation, a shadowy figure standing underneath or near one of the streetlights. The light does not even penetrate the figure, and then a few seconds later, the figure is gone. I can get quite close to the figure, but it vanishes if you attempt to come too close, 5 to 10 feet. The figure is also lifeless, similar to a mannequin doll with no movement, and its arms perfectly straight next to its sides. The weirdest part, however, is that I always experience technical difficulties with any electronics that I have on me at the time of the encounter. For example, my phone suddenly stops working due to drained batteries, even if it was almost completely charged at 100% originally, or the phone starts lagging to such an extent that I cannot even operate the password lock properly. I also experience a strange tingling sensation on my back and on the top of my head. It is not an optical illusion caused by weather phenomena, for this has occurred on days where the sky is clear. My eyesight is 20/20, and I do not have any form of psychological disorders like schizophrenia, which could explain these sightings. In total, this has happened to me about 5 times over the last few months, and I am discombobulated by such events. Has anyone else experienced the same thing? Thanks. Pick is similar to what I have experienced.